right, so we're beginning now the book of Nehemiah. And so you can write at the top, so kind of give yourself the context. The temple has been rebuilt in Jerusalem. Now the walls of the city need to be reconstructed. And that is the mission of Nehemiah. Chapter 1, verse 1. The words of Nehemiah, the son of Hekeliah. Now it happened in the month of Chislev, in the 20th year, as I was in Susa, the capital, that Hanani, one of my brethren, came with certain men out of Judah, and I asked them concerning the Jews that survived, who had escaped exile, and concerning Jerusalem. And they said to me, the survivors there in the province who escaped exile are in great trouble and shame. Underline, the wall of Jerusalem is broken down and its gates are destroyed by fire. All right, so that is the main crux of this book. You can also make a note here that this takes place 15 years after Ezra returned. Jump ahead to chapter 2, verse 11. So I came to Jerusalem and was there 3 days. Then I arose in the night, I and a few men with me, and I told no one what my God had put into my heart to do for Jerusalem. There was no beast with me but the beast on which I rode. I went out by night by the valley gate to the jackal's well and to the dung gate, and I inspected the walls of Jerusalem, which were broken down, and its gates which had been destroyed by fire. Then I went on to the fountain gate and to the king's pool, but there was no place for the beast that was under me to pass. Then I went up in the night by the valley and inspected the wall. And I turned back and entered the valley gate, and so returned. And the official did not know where I had gone or what I was doing. And I had not yet told the Jews, the priests, the nobles, the officials, and the rest that were to do the work. Jump ahead to chapter 3, verse 1. Then Eliashib, the high priest, rose up with his brethren, the priests, and they built the sheep gate. They consecrated and set its doors. They consecrated as far as the Tower of the 100, as far as the Tower of Hanal. And next to him, the men of Jericho built, and next to them, Zakur, the son of Imri, built. So they began organizing construction on these walls. Jump ahead to chapter 6, verse 15. After a lot of work and some attempted plots to disrupt the construction, so the wall was finished on the 25th day of the month, Elul, in 52 days. Jump ahead now to chapter 7, verse 73. Now that the temple's been reconstructed and the walls of the city have been reconstructed, Ezra, the high priest, who returned before Nehemiah, leads the people in an act of reconsecrating themselves to Yahweh. And what he does is he reads the Torah to them, and he explains it to them, and everyone recommits to following the covenant with Yahweh. Verse 73, so the priests, the Levites, the gatekeepers, the singers, some of the people, the temple servants, and all Israel lived in their towns. And when the 7th month had come, the children of Israel were in their towns. And all the people gathered as one man into the squares before the water gate. And they told Ezra the scribe to bring the book of the law of Moses, which the Lord had given to Israel. Jump ahead to verse 8 of chapter 8. And they read from the book, from the law of God clearly, and they gave the sense so that the people understood the reading. What does that mean? Well, the scriptures are written in Hebrew, and as I've said repeatedly, everyone's starting to speak Aramaic now. So Ezra's reading the text in Hebrew, but then he's also giving the translation, also the interpretation to the Jews who may not have as great of a grasp on their native language. Verse 9, and Nehemiah, who was the governor, and Ezra, the priest and scribe, And the Levites who talked to the people said to the people, "This day is holy to the Lord your God. Do not mourn or weep." So by the time you get to Nehemiah, Zerubbabel, that son of David's no longer in charge. Now Nehemiah is acting as governor, and Ezra and him are kind of co-ruling Jerusalem as this like secular office as governor and high priest running the city together. Jump ahead to chapter 8, verse 17. And all the assembly of those who had returned from the captivity made booths and dwelt in the booths. For from the days of Yeshua, the son of Nun, to that day, the sons of Israel had not done so. All right, so you just get reminded about how bad Israel has been at following Deuteronomy. And here they're kind of making a serious effort to, no, we're going to keep these religious feasts. We have been keeping them since the times of Joshua. All right. And so, again, as I said, this is like the beginning of the Pharisee movement. All right. Typically, when we think of Pharisees, you think of someone who's a hypocrite, because a lot of the Pharisees during the time of Christ were hypocrites, especially those who were the elders and kind of in charge of everything. Most likely, if you guys were Jews in the first century, given the fact that you go to Tyburn Academy, you probably would have belonged to the Pharisee sect, right? Because that was a sect of Judaism that took its faith very seriously. And it was kind of opposed to the Sadducees, who are more skeptic and like, I don't know if I necessarily believe everything. Like, they don't believe in the soul, they don't believe in a resurrection of the dead, they don't believe in angels. So because of that, they don't really pay attention to the books of the prophets. But the Pharisees were kind of more intense in their practice, and the early church was made up at the start of mostly Pharisees who were converting to Christianity. And so while that whole sect has its issues and its corruptions during the time of Christ, its original beginnings, so to speak, had these kind of intentions of, we really want to keep the Torah, we want to be faithful this time around. And the fruit that pays off is most of the Pharisees do end up converting after the resurrection and after Pentecost. In chapter 9, verse 6, Ezra gives a long prayer, offers up a long prayer to God. You can just make note this goes through all of salvation history. So at a couple different points, I've told you guys that in the Old Testament, there's different areas where you get salvation history summarized. This is one of those instances where he just kind of goes through Adam and Eve, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, what they did in Egypt, so on and so forth. Now, in this prayer, Ezra brings up a very important point, and this is critical to understanding the anxiousness surrounding the waiting for the coming of the Messiah. Chapter 9, verse 36. Behold, we are slaves this day in the land that you gave to our fathers to enjoy its fruit and its good gifts. Behold, we are slaves. So the restoration is not complete. The exile is not entirely over. This ties in to Daniel chapter 9. So it's in the book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah says the exile will be 70 years. And after 70 years, the Jews get to go home. But it's in the book of Daniel, chapter 9, that Daniel speaks with Gabriel, and Gabriel tells him the geographic exile will end in 70 years, but the exile won't completely end for a week of 70 years, 490 years. And so that's manifested by two different ways. We're resuming here tomorrow.